You don't even have an office, the new intern said, half laughing, half confused as I stirred powdered creamer into my coffee with the back end of a precision screwdriver. She was right. I didn't. I had a rolling chair that lived half in DevOps and half in an old server closet I'd never bothered to clean out. The carpet smelled like dryer lint and burnt code, and nobody ever came in unless the Wi-Fi went down. But that was fine by me. I wasn't there for beanbags or kombucha. I was there because I built the engine under the hood, and no one ever checks the hood if the car still runs. 10 years. That's how long I gave them. 10 years of building, optimizing, threading neural pipelines like lace into a system that fed a dozen sectors and 3 continents. My name wasn't on the launch decks, wasn't on the funding round press releases. But my code, my logic trees, they were buried in everything, from the facial recognition tool they pitched to law enforcement to the AI model that revolutionized logistics planning for hospitals. The only person who ever really understood what I did was the founder, and he retired 6 years ago after Series C when the board replaced vision with velocity. Quick thing before we dive deeper. If this story hits even a little too close to home, do us a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe. It tells the team these stories matter and keeps them coming. Thanks. Now back to it. After the founder left, we got a string of executives with teeth too white and resumes too slick. They liked dashboards, growth graphs, flow charts with words like synergy and vertical integration. They didn't care who built what. They only cared how fast they could bolt a rocket onto it and tell investors it was flying. I wasn't flashy. Never have been. No MBA, no TED Talk, no thirst trap LinkedIn posts with sun-drenched selfies about founder resilience. I had a mechanical engineering degree, a minor in applied mathematics, and a filing cabinet full of scribbled patent drafts dating back to 2014. I kept my head down, didn't chase titles. When they offered me stock options back in the early days, I said no. Not because I wasn't loyal, but because I wanted something better. Something no one else seemed to notice, the fine print. My first employment contract had a clause, paragraph 7.4. It was a relic, probably pulled from some startup boilerplate template, but I saw it, and I didn't let it go. It said that if any patent I filed for the company was unused or left unlicensed for more than 5 years, full ownership reverted back to the inventor. Me. I highlighted it, brought it up during signing. HR nodded like I was asking about dental benefits. Sure, whatever, they said. I initialed it. Twice, and then I waited. I became a ghost in the machine. The tech folks came and went. Startup life, high churn, low memory, but I stayed. And every time a new tool or feature needed an algorithm to make it not just run, but learn, they came to me. I didn't make noise. I just handed them brilliance, and they never looked past the commits. Not once. By year 6, most of the senior engineers were younger than the coffee machine. They called me Doc, like I was some kind of dusty oracle. I didn't mind. Better to be underestimated. They'd pitch ideas, ask for help solving logic snags, then slap their names on the build docs. I'd nod, sip my burnt coffee, and quietly file the provisional patents under my name, assigned to the company, but time-stamped, tagged, and tracked, just in case. The funny thing about being invisible is that people start treating you like furniture. They assume you'll always be there, until one day you're not. His name was Mason Greer. Brand new CTO. Walked in like he was auditioning for a reboot of Silicon Valley. All tailored slacks and Patagonia vest over a shirt so tight you could count the ribs. First thing he did was schedule a series of visibility audits, which, as it turns out, meant standing in front of everyone's desks pretending he knew what they did. When he got to me, hunched over a heat map model that was bleeding memory like a stuck pig, he squinted at my badge like he couldn't figure out why someone without a VP title still had building access. "What is it you actually do?" he asked, arms crossed, like I was a stowaway on his shiny new yacht. I just said, "System architecture," and went back to my screen. That irritated him. People like Mason don't like being dismissed, especially not by someone who isn't trying to impress them. A week later, I was invited to a budget review, unusual, considering I'd spent the last 2 years being treated like a basement roomer. The room was full of people with crisp laptops and insecure smiles. Decks were already on the screen, charts, burn rates, efficiency reports. Mason walked in late, made a show of dropping his phone face up on the table, and said, "Let's talk cost centers." Then it came. 3 slides in, Mason looked directly at me. And what's your equity position? I blinked. Pardon? Your stock options. How many are vested? I shrugged. None. That one word dropped like a beer bottle on tile. The room went quiet, just for a beat too long. Then someone cleared their throat. Mason grinned like he'd caught a cockroach under a wine glass. Interesting, he said. None? I nodded. Never took any. Negotiated IP clauses instead. He waved that off like I'd mentioned astrology. So, no upside in the company's success? Just in its survival, I said, and went back to my notes. But I saw it. The flicker in his eyes, the mental post-it going up. No options, no loyalty, under easy cut. And just like that, I was tagged. Not as a founder, not as a builder, but as dead weight. I heard from a friend in finance later that same afternoon, Mason had gone straight to the board after that meeting and said, "She's not a flight risk. She's not even on the plane. That's legacy drag. We can cut her in Q2 and no one will blink." And they didn't. The worst part wasn't the insult. I've eaten bigger ones for breakfast, washed them down with burnt coffee and bad Wi-Fi. The worst part was how casually it was said, like I was just a piece of junk mail they forgot to unsubscribe from. That night, I sat in my tiny corner of the server closet, watching the lights blink on the old firewall box like they were trying to spell something. Maybe run, maybe now. I didn't run. I just smiled, leaned back, and pulled out a manila folder I hadn't touched in years. Inside, a printed copy of my original employment contract. Highlighted in yellow, Clause 7.4, the reversion clause. I'd been invisible for so long they forgot I was even there. But they were about to remember. 2 weeks later, the company announced a strategic realignment of talent resources. Translation: purge anyone who doesn't fit Mason's vision of a scalable, selfie-ready workforce. I got the calendar invite at 7:04 a.m., titled simply, One-on-One, HR, that's corporate for Bring a Box. Karen from HR met me in conference room F like she was delivering a casserole to a neighbor whose dog just died. She slid the paperwork across the table with all the warmth of a tax notice and said, "We appreciate your service. This isn't a reflection of your contributions." My name wasn't even printed on the first page. It still had a placeholder from the last poor bastard they'd cut and pasted for. I didn't argue. Didn't ask for an explanation. I just read through the pages like I was skimming an old grocery list. Severance. 2 months. NDA standard. IP, they thought they owned everything. Cute. I initialed where needed, signed with a pen that bled just a little too red, and handed it back with a smile that said nothing and everything. Then I asked a single question. Mind if I take a few internal architecture diagrams for my archive? Early drafts, mostly. Legacy infrastructure, nothing sensitive. Karen blinked. Sure, just CC legal, I guess. Mason wasn't even in the room. Too busy future-proofing the company by installing Slack bots and replacing real engineers with buzzwords in Patagonia vests. I walked past his glass office, where he was mid-sentence pitching some bullshit about cloud-native synergies to a VC on Zoom. He didn't look up. I didn't wave. I boxed my few belongings, a backup drive, my framed photo of Ada Lovelace flipping the bird, a gag gift, but accurate, a coffee mug that said low level and loving it. Nobody stopped me. Nobody hugged me. I think half of them assumed I'd already left years ago. On my way out, I passed the intern who once asked why I didn't have an office. She looked up, confused. "Are you leaving?" "Apparently I'm not on the plane," I said. She frowned. "But you built the plane." I smiled. That's what they forgot. In the parking garage, I sat in my car for a moment, watching my own reflection in the cracked rearview mirror. I looked calm. Because I was. I didn't slam the steering wheel, didn't scream or cry or compose some dramatic exit post on LinkedIn about bittersweet goodbyes and the journey ahead. I just opened my glove box, pulled out a USB drive with a familiar blue sticker, patent folder, master, and plugged it into my laptop. 11 files, each with an expiration date highlighted in green. That date had passed. And now, the countdown began. It was 2014 when I first brought it up. Back then, we worked out of a refurbished auto shop with insulation that whistled when it rained. The founder, Eli, was an engineer's engineer, frugal, distracted, too smart for HR. We just landed our first real contract, and I told him, flat out, I wasn't comfortable assigning blanket ownership of my IP without a reversion clause. He scratched his beard, blinked like I'd just asked him to explain string theory backwards, then muttered, Sure, draft it and run it by legal. You're the one building the damn things anyway. So I did. Paragraph 7.4. Any patents, provisional or filed, that remain unlicensed or unused in commercial products for more than 5 consecutive years shall revert, in full ownership, to the original inventor. The language was dry, surgical, and buried between paragraphs about relocation stipends and dispute resolution protocols. It made it through review because no one expected the company to last that long. 5 years felt like a century in startup time. When the company grew, when the Series B checks started rolling in and HR got a proper office and kombucha machines showed up, no one went back and read the old contracts. They were too busy rewriting bonus structures and polishing pitch decks for people who thought deep learning was a kind of inspirational mindset. But I remembered. I remembered every clause, every date, every damned provisional application I'd filed in the midnight haze of caffeine and fluorescent buzz. I never let legal clean them up. I never let them bury me under revised templates. I signed every amendment with the same fountain pen and always asked for a PDF copy for my records. So when Mason gave me the boot, I didn't panic. I pulled up my folder, patenttimeline.xlsx, and filtered the list by reversion eligibility. 11 entries turned green, 11 systems, algorithms, and logic engines that now belong to me. Not hypothetically, not morally, legally. Each had passed its 5-year dormancy window. None had been licensed externally. And the commercial use? Lapsed. Deprecated in favor of next-gen tools that never quite worked as well. By law, by contract, they were mine. I didn't crow about it, didn't call a lawyer or post a smug tweet. I just opened a quiet little Delaware LLC called Gray Line IP Holdings, ran it through a registered agent in Nevada for discretion, and began the transfers. One by one. Clean, legal, quiet. No red flags were raised. The original assignments had expired years ago. The USPTO didn't care. To them, I was just the inventor reclaiming my rights under a contract clause nobody had bothered to notice. It felt less like revenge and more like correcting an error in a long-running equation. I paid the fees, dotted every I, filed 3 continuations in part where the original language left wiggle room. I even updated the descriptions. Cleaner now, tighter, better aligned with where the industry had drifted. And I attached usage logs, time-stamped, watermarked, notarized, not for court, just for fun. Then I waited. No press release, no alert on Mason's dashboard, no ping in Slack. They wouldn't notice. Not yet. Not until the first competitor emailed me back. Would you be open to licensing terms? And I was. It started with a product demo. I was watching a live stream out of morbid curiosity. One of our smaller competitors, Nexivis AI, unveiling their breakthrough predictive modeling engine for supply chain optimization. Big words, glitchy slides. You could smell the VC perfume through the screen, but then they ran the demo. It was subtle, but unmistakable. The way their system reduced latency between model retraining intervals. The weird, recursive loop I designed to stabilize outlier clusters. The checksum logic that only existed because I'd once spilled coffee on a dev server and figured out a better way to auto-recover corrupted node memory. That was my code. Patent 811CX, originally titled Adaptive Loop Compression for Predictive Logic Models, filed 7 years ago, abandoned by my former company after a failed prototype, forgotten by everyone, except me. I didn't fume. I didn't scream. I opened a new email window, addressed it to Nexivis Legal, and attached a clean PDF of the patent, followed by a second file titled Licensing Proposal Tier 1 Use. Subject line: Use of protected algorithmic IP, Patent 811CX. The body was brief. Dear Nexivus, we've observed that your latest model may incorporate elements protected under U.S. Patent 811CX. We're open to resolving this matter amicably. Licensing terms attached. Please advise on your preferred timeline for response. No threats. No lawsuit language, just business. They replied in less than 48 hours. Their general counsel thanked me for the clarity, said they'd had a third-party firm build portions of the engine and were unaware of the overlap. He asked 2 questions. Was the IP clean, and would I offer exclusivity? It was. I wouldn't. We signed within the week. They paid the initial fee without blinking. Mid-6 figures plus quarterly residuals. I threw in a free 2-hour consulting block to explain the inner workings of 811CX. The CTO, an actual engineer, not a spreadsheet cosplayer like Mason, listened closely, then said, I always wondered who built that framework. We tried for 2 years to mimic it and never got it stable. I told him the secret. You have to let the model make wrong decisions on purpose, just to teach it what failure smells like. He nodded like I'd just handed him fire. The day after the wire transfer cleared, I noticed a tiny change on Nexivis's product page. At the bottom of the screen, beneath the Powered by Nexivis AI tag, was a second line in 9-point gray text. Certain technologies licensed from Grayline IP Holdings, LLC. No fanfare, no announcement. Just a whisper in the footer. It was perfect. Not long after, 2 more emails came in. One from a cybersecurity startup in Boston, the other from a medtech analytics firm that had spun off from a university lab. Both of them had systems that brushed up against patents in my folder. Both wanted to talk licensing. No one fought, no one postured, because it turns out when you're not swinging for vengeance, but simply holding the receipt, they pay. And when they do, they thank you. I never gloated, never bragged. Just sent the paperwork, collected the payments, and added 1 more line to the list. 811CX, licensed. Status, active, visibility, footer. It spread quietly, like frost on glass. By the end of the first quarter, 4 competitors had signed licensing deals. Not just startups this time. One of them was Stratiform, the mid-tier enterprise giant that had once laughed my old company out of a funding round. Now they were paying me for the math behind their predictive anomaly detection suite. Another was Alien, a boutique firm that ran compliance modeling for financial systems. They didn't even blink at the fee, just signed, wired the money, and added their little gray footer. Technology licensed from Grayline IP Holdings, LLC. It became a pattern, a slow, delicious domino fall. The language was always the same, always muted, always professional. Certain underlying systems licensed from Grayline. Predictive modules powered by Grayline IP. Tiny footnotes, public yet discreet. They started showing up in pitch decks, in legal disclaimers, in earnings calls where analysts asked about licensing costs and roadmap dependencies. Nothing flashy, just quiet acknowledgement that my code, my logic, was now part of the foundation they were building on. They didn't even ask if it came from my former employer. They knew it didn't. They'd done their diligence, but someone else hadn't. Sales started to dip back at my old company. At first, it was blamed on market volatility and delayed procurement cycles, but the numbers kept sliding. Clients began asking questions. One even pulled out of a renewal after noticing Stratiform's product had become faster, leaner, and legally cleaner. Then came the message from inside. A former colleague, still on the dev team, still smart enough to know when something smelled off, sent me a screenshot. It was a Slack thread between Mason and someone in product. Mason. Why the hell is her company's name on 3 of our competitors' systems? Product lead. Grayline? You mean the footer? Mason. Yes, that's her. That's the one we cut. Product lead. They're all licensing patents. Smart move. Mason. Do we still own those patents? There was a long pause, then a reply. Product lead. I think legal's reviewing that. 2 days later, I got another message, this time from someone in the finance org, anonymously forwarded to a dummy email I'd set up years ago. Subject line, red flag in the cap table deck. Attached was a spreadsheet being prepped for a new investor pitch. Highlighted in red, IP ownership, unverified. Next to it, a note. Confirm status of legacy patents. At least 5 now appear active under outside entity. Investors started asking questions. The board called a special session. I wasn't in the room, but I could feel the air leaking from it. Because when you build something essential and someone slices you out like expired lunch meat without reading what you actually own, there's only one way the story ends. A slow unraveling thread by thread until the entire cheap suit comes apart. And Mason? Mason was losing grip. He started calling emergency stand-ups, demanding timelines, threatening legal. But the damage was already done. You can't reclaim what you never noticed slipping out the door, especially when it's been sitting in your contract, signed and countersigned for nearly a decade. I didn't smile. Not really. But I did buy a bottle of mid-shelf bourbon and watched their quarterly metrics tick down like a countdown timer I'd set years ago. This wasn't revenge. It was restitution. Charged monthly, licenses auto-renewing, footers multiplying, gray line IP holdings. Not a threat, just a signature. The call came on a Wednesday, middle of the afternoon, while I was refilling the bird feeder outside my kitchen window. Sun was out. Wind was soft. The kind of day that makes you forget you ever spent a decade inside fluorescent-lit code caves and glass-walled conference rooms that reeked of old hummus and forced optimism. My phone buzzed once. Then again. Then 4 more times, all from numbers I recognized. The company had gone quiet for weeks after the footer fiasco. I figured they were regrouping, trying to spin the narrative, maybe blaming junior staff, maybe hoping I'd vanish into the background again like I always had. But apparently, it had reached the funding stage, and that's where the wheels came off. They were prepping for Series E, a big one. New VC money, international exposure, a fresh burn cycle to push Mason's vision of a streamlined, productized, everything-as-a-service AI empire. But due diligence is a cruel mirror. It doesn't care about TEDx charisma or how many Gartner analysts you've wined and dined. It asks boring questions like, who owns this? And can you prove it? And somewhere between the 6th and 7th data room folder, someone must have asked, where are the patent assignments? What they found instead were a handful of expired agreements, 6 missing transfer memos, and 1 bright yellow highlight on an old employment contract. Paragraph 7.4, clear as daylight. If patent unused or unlicensed by 5 years from filing date, ownership reverts to the original inventor. I know this because a contact in their outside counsel team, an ex-colleague from a past life, sent me a single message. They just read it aloud in the boardroom. Mason stopped breathing for a full 5 seconds. Another message followed 10 minutes later, this one less amused. The board is furious. Investors are livid. Someone just asked, why is she licensing our IP to competitors? Mason tried to bluff. Legal shut it down, and then came the call. Official. From a blocked number, straight to voicemail. Hi, this is Cassandra from Executive Affairs at, she said, voice taut with forced calm. We'd really appreciate a quick call back regarding some clarifications around prior agreements. It seems some language may have been misinterpreted, and we're hoping to resolve it collaboratively. She used the word collaboratively like it was a fire extinguisher. I didn't call back. They rang again later that day. This time it was Mason. His voice wasn't angry, it was measured, like he'd practiced the script 3 times in the mirror while chewing antacids. Look, I think we might have gotten off on the wrong foot, he said, like this was all just a quirky misunderstanding at a dinner party. I think there's room for alignment here. Maybe we bring you in as an advisor, formalize things, clean up the paperwork, get everyone back on the same page. There was a long pause. Then, call me, please. I let that one go to voicemail too. I didn't need to say anything. They'd already said everything for me by not reading what mattered when it counted, by treating the person who built their engine like a removable part, by assuming silence meant absence. Now that silence echoed through their legal files, their boardrooms, their investor meetings, I kept the voicemail, archived it, along with the contract scan, the filing receipts, the time-stamped transfer logs, a quiet museum of overlooked power. Later that night, I walked out onto the porch, sipped my bourbon, and checked the website for Grayline IP holdings. 17 footer notices, 9 active licenses, 4 pending, and 1 message in my inbox from a new name entirely. We're building something ambitious. Your name keeps coming up. Are you open to partnerships? I didn't answer that one right away either. Let them wait. By Q3, the slide was no longer deniable. Stratiform announced a feature update that blew past anything my old company had even attempted. Real-time model adaptability, sub-4-second latency, and a UI so smooth you could mistake it for vapor. The secret sauce? 2 of my reclaimed patents bundled into their back-end pipeline under an exclusive sublicense they paid a fortune for, happily. Nexivus followed a week later with a compliance audit tool that used my old anomaly scaffolding. They marketed it as frictionless foresight, and it worked. Clients migrated fast. Legal departments loved it. CTOs loved it more. Meanwhile, Mason's crew tried to plug holes in a ship that had already listed too far. They called emergency all hands, declared bold pivots. They rolled out a rushed beta called Sentient Core that looked suspiciously like a Frankenstein version of my old model tree, only slower, sloppier, and lacking the core logic it was originally built on. That logic now lived in footer notices across half the sector. Greyline IP Holdings had become a kind of ghost watermark, a quiet reassurance to engineers and legal teams alike. You're covered. This works. It's clean. Investor calls turned hostile. Funding fell through. 2 backers pulled term sheets mid-negotiation, citing unresolved IP concerns. Word got around, they don't own their core anymore. And Mason? He held on for 3 more weeks. Then someone leaked the recording of a tense investor update. Mason stammering while an analyst asked, flat out, why are we paying market rates for a product that's legally dependent on technology you don't control? That was the end of his tenure. The board didn't release a statement, just quietly scrubbed his face from the leadership page and moved someone from operations into the interim CTO slot. No press, no farewell post, just vanished. It was almost sad. Almost. I watched it all from a small shared office I rented downtown. Nothing fancy. Exposed brick, decent coffee, bad parking, the kind of place no one looks twice at. But from there, I updated Greyline's homepage for the first time since launching it. One line, just beneath the logo, open to licensing discussions, discretion guaranteed. That line alone tripled my inbox volume overnight. I became the shadow vendor, the discreet broker of clean, proven, legally bulletproof logic. People didn't want to reinvent the wheel, they wanted the wheel that worked. And I had the receipts to prove it. Every time a new CTO asked, is this covered? I'd send them a PDF with the patent ID, filing dates, ownership transfer logs, and license templates ready to go. I wasn't chasing clients, I was choosing them. My favorite message came from an ex-senior engineer at my old firm, now working at a rival. I finally read the clause. I can't believe you pulled that off. I didn't respond. Just forwarded him a licensing link and a note that said, believe it, you're covered now. The hunted had become the vendor. The name whispered behind closed doors in pitch meetings and due diligence calls. Not for scandal, for certainty. They wanted what I had. And I only gave it to those who respected where it came from. The platform was called Luminaris, sleek branding, launch event at a rooftop in San Francisco, champagne and slow-motion drone footage of smiling engineers pointing at nothing in particular, a partnership between 3 multinationals and 1 bleeding-edge startup backed by a sovereign wealth fund. I wasn't invited, didn't need to be. The demo link landed in my inbox that morning. No fanfare, just a thought you'd be interested from an old contact who now ran compliance at one of the partner firms. I brewed a fresh cup of coffee, pulled my laptop onto the sun-drenched corner of my desk, and clicked the link. The interface loaded like silk. They'd built something good, modern, modular, fast, beautiful latency, smart edge caching, and under the hood, tucked deep in the behavioral model routing engine, was something unmistakably mine. A refined version of patent 8111CX crossbred with 2 others I'd bundled under a non-exclusive suite 9 months earlier. I scrolled to the bottom. There it was. 9-point gray font, bottom left footer. Powered by modules licensed from Greyline IP Holdings, LLC. No extra words, no bio, no story, just attribution. And that was enough. I leaned back, thumb hovering over the edge of my mug. The warm smell of coffee, the silence of no meetings, no bosses, no Mason pacing around calling people resources. Just me. Watching a system hum with the logic I wrote under terms I dictated, paid for on my timeline. The notification pinged as I closed the tab. LinkedIn, recruiter, hi, saw your name pop up in our internal review of licensed technologies. One of our partners is looking for a consultant with your background. Would you be open to discussing an advisory role? Generous terms. I didn't hesitate. Typed back one line. Only if you read the fine print. No emojis, no smiley face, just the truth. They thought I was easy to cut. Turns out, I was the foundation they didn't bother to read.